The most successful coaches never stop learning. They are committed to their personal growth and making themselves better. I'm Colby Donovan, and welcome to the Coaching Coaches Podcast. I'll speak with the world's most respected coaches, best-selling authors, and top business leaders to give you insight into their philosophies, lessons, and mindsets for you to apply to your own life. Head on over to coachingcoaches.co, where you can subscribe to this podcast and join some of the top coaches around the country who also enjoy our regular newsletter. My guest today is Travis Wyckoff, founder of Kingdom Coaching, a consulting business for coaches to help provide the tools, strategies, and skills you need to transform how you lead yourself, lead others, and win in all areas. He also hosts the podcast called Coaching DNA, which I was recently a guest on. Previously, he coached college baseball for 11 years and spent 6 years leading on a church staff. In this episode, we discuss the transition from coaching college baseball to starting Kingdom Coaching. He explains the different ways he works with coaches, whether it's one-on-one, coaching a whole staff, or working with coaches in different cohorts. We spend a lot of time around leadership, a topic he's incredibly passionate about. After his time spent working with some of the top coaches, like Tim Corbin, he distills a great leader down to character, emotional intelligence, clarity, and their psychological makeup. I've been a big fan of Travis's and his podcast from afar and really enjoyed speaking with him. Please enjoy the episode. Travis, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Colby.
So I'm excited. This is episode 2 of our podcast crossover, and it was very funny when you and I first kind of connected because I was listening to, I think, 3 of your podcasts in a row, and then you had reached out to me and we connected. And then I realized the guy who I was listening to while doing the dishes the day before was the same guy who emailed me. So it's very glad we connected, and it's a small world.
Totally. Love it. Yeah, I love it.
So why don't you just give people an overview of kind of your background, coaching, playing, pastor, what you're doing now, and then we can dive in through all the different steps.
Yeah, for sure. So played college baseball, Wichita State, spent a couple years in the minor leagues, got done playing, and coached college baseball for 11 years. In 2010, just felt a stirring, felt a draw out of college coaching, and actually went on staff and spent 6 years at on a church staff here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And those 6 years were really pivotal. Obviously, the 11 years coaching college baseball were tons of growth and very foundational, and just a really just a time of a ton of growth. But that's a hard profession. Coaching is really hard. So went and spent 6 years, like I said, on a church staff. That worked for a guy by the name of Rodney Hobbs. When I started going to church at this church, Stonegate Church, and then when I was hired, we're talking, I think there was probably 100 people or so. And Rodney Hobbs is he's a freak show of a leader, just a really, really good leader. And I both personally experienced and then saw what it looks like to be developed as a leader. So those 6 years were really pivotal for me. So I had the coaching background, and then I get into ministry, and I saw what leadership development looked like. I saw what it really looks like to walk with somebody and develop them. So I got developed, and then also saw what it looked like, and just a pivotal 6 years for me. Then again, felt a stirring, time to get out of ministry. And then I started Kingdom Coaching, which is my consulting business where I work with coaches, primarily college coaches, but have done some work with high school coaches in the area of leadership. Primarily, I work in 3 areas: leading self, leading others, and leading programs. And so I've been doing that since September of 2017, and really feel called. I think my background, when I look back now in hindsight, I can see all the twists and turns that had to happen for me to be equipped to do what I'm doing now. And I think I'm in a sweet spot. I love what I'm doing, and couldn't be more happy and blessed.
I love stories about, not that I love stories about people getting out of coaching, but just the fact that being an actual coach on the floor, on the field, wherever it is, isn't
everything for everyone, right? Like you found your calling. Kevin Eastman was with the Clippers and the Celtics, and he decided he wanted to do, leadership consulting, kind of like what you talked about. Fran Fraschilla said, I want to be more of a father at home, and I'm going to step away from the game, but still be around the game. And I think it's a great lesson that we all can find our little niche in life. Sometimes it takes time, it takes pain, but I love the story. What was, when you look back and you kind of made the choice to get out of coaching, how hard of a choice was that? And what was kind of the reason for that?
It wasn't hard. I think I just kept having the thought of like, I think it started off as just an internal, internal almost drawing away from coaching. And then you start, thinking logically on like, okay, I could actually spend more time with my family. I can see my family more. And it really wasn't hard, honestly. It was one of those things where I really felt the desire. It was almost like the day I said, I need to get out of coaching was the day I lost the desire to teach a student athlete a curveball or a changeup. It was just kind of removed. The thing I did miss was the relationships. I did miss the coaching staff feel that, when you're on a coaching staff, there's just something really powerful about being on a team, which I got. It was just in a different field. It was in ministry as opposed to coaching. So that scratch got itched. But yeah, honestly, it wasn't that hard of a choice for me. It was time, I think, is the easiest way to say it.
Yeah. And then so when you step away, what were you talked about? Is it Rodney? I'll edit it. Rodney Hobbs?
Rodney Hobbs. Yep.
So when you spent your time around Rodney Hobbs, and you talk about he's a phenomenal leader. Leadership is one of these, it's like culture. There's a hilarious video about college basketball coaches. I'll link in the show notes. It's going to be an episode I've got coming out soon with Michelle Gelfand on culture. But like leadership and culture are these things that everyone talks about and says they're going to be a great leader and have a great culture. But like no one defines it. No one talks about what it is. No one says, oh, in this person, I saw this. So what did you see in him that made him a great leader?
Yeah. Really, really operated, let me rephrase that, brought tremendous clarity to the day-to-day, but also the big picture. There was just a clarity with him. He felt like he was always one step ahead. I think some of the leaders that I've been around and seen, it feels like they need to take a right in a quarter mile and they're in the left lane, and 20 feet before it's time to take a right, they realize that they need to take a right and they whip over in the right lane, and everyone's got whiplash. Rodney Hobbs was the opposite. He anticipated, he saw where we were going. It felt comfortable to follow him because he just had a feel, he had clarity of where he was going. That's one. Emotionally intelligent. You mentioned that on my podcast, talking about emotional intelligence. Really just emotionally intelligent. He's a smart guy. He's an avid reader. It was one of those, he brought tremendous clarity, and I really trusted the guy. I've just really flat out trusted him, and still to this day, he's one of my best friends. So I think those are the adjectives or that picture that probably would sum up his leadership and who he was. And obviously just a good dude. I mean, he's a guy that you wanted to hang with, guy you wanted to be around.
When you talk about he was great about providing clarity and thinking one step ahead, how did he relay that clarity to you? Right? Because it's one thing for me to say, I know that we're going to be this kind of team, or this is the end goal, but actually telling that story, a lot of people aren't very good at that because it's really, really hard.
Yeah. His clarity in his mind would come out really, really clear verbally. And so he was really a succinct, to the point, had used great language. He's a really, really good communicator. Like if you were to hear him preach, there's not many ums. He uses, it's like every sentence is power packed with just gold. By the way, that's not me. I'm a verbal processor. So I'll talk 8 minutes And out of those 8 minutes, I'll say what I want to say, but it's filtered around just a ton of crud around it. So you're like, man, I think I kind of heard what you say. Writing's the opposite. He has clarity in his mind where we want to go, what we want to do. And then when he communicates it, it's like 4 sentences. Each sentence is power packed with information and is just crystal clear. He is I'd put him in that like freak show category of communicators.
Have you had him on your podcast before? Because if not, I'm itching to hear you talk to him.
I did.
All right, we're gonna link that in the show notes
you'd
too.
have to check it out. Yeah.
We'll link that in the show notes if you're listening. That's gonna be
he's a stud, dude. He's a stud.
And so you leave coaching, you're doing that. What leads to Kingdom Coaching and what you're doing now? What leads to writing and a podcast and all the other consulting things you have going on?
Again, just I think my faith would say this, that there was just a draw. I just felt like, okay, I think I'm supposed to work with coaches. I reached out to a buddy of mine who was a college basketball coach and ran it by him, and we had some dialogue. And then I started talking to other coaches on what do you think? And I had a lot of confirmation as far as some giftings are concerned. A lot of confirmation as far as like, yes, there's a need for it. And so I think the best I can articulate, Colby, is there was just a draw to work with coaches. It helped that I had seen what leadership development looked like. It helped that I had been in the sports world pretty much my whole life. So that's kind of my background. You add in, again, the leadership stuff. And I just felt like a sense of like, I need to be in this space. But yeah, I just felt a draw to hop in and walk with coaches.
So talk to me about Kingdom Coaching. When did it start? What was the idea when it started? Was there a grand plan, or was this just you're going to start working on X and see where it goes?
Yeah, for sure that. Just again, felt a draw that I think I'm supposed to work with coaches. And so there was a university out in East Texas Baptist University, that I had gotten to know the athletic director and the president from my time coaching at Dallas Baptist. They brought me in to start working with their coaches, which was really, I mean, talk about a blessing. I mean, a massive, massive blessing to go work with their coaches and to kind of get ingrained out there in East Texas Baptist. So I'll go out there a couple times a month. No grand plan at all. I just thought I'm going to just start working with coaches. I learned a ton over the last 3.5, almost 4 years now of Kingdom Coaching. A lot of what not to do, a lot of scrapes. And honestly, the thing that probably has come most naturally was the actual coaching. All the other stuff was unnatural to me. You know, as far as the marketing side of things and the business side of things, those are the things you don't think about. I just envisioned, well, I'm just going to go work with coaches and let's do this. And then all of a sudden it's like, dang, people aren't actually waiting at my door to work with me. What's going on? Oh yeah, I need to drive some content. Oh yeah, I need to do some marketing. I need to do some things that draw attention to myself, not in an egotistical way, just in a business savvy way. So I've learned a lot. And I would go back to probably the first couple years as I was working with East Texas Baptist coaches and different coaches that I was working with in those first couple years. Just getting a ton of reps was really, really helpful. So I had no grand plan, and I still don't have that grand of a plan. I kind of am like, all right, what's next? What's the next hurdle I need to get? What's the next, the next plateau or the next, stop on the mountain as I'm trying to climb this mountain. So probably not going to write a business book about how to do it. But I think the Lord has given me just enough grit and tenacity and to keep going, and things are going well. And so I hope that answered your question, Colby.
No, it does. And I love it because it's, like you said, it's one thing to say, I want to sit down and have a conversation with this coach or coach this coach, be consulting for this coach. It's another thing to set up a website with a payment system or get your podcast on iTunes. So it's a lot. So I respect it. So yeah, do you want to walk through some of the different things you're doing and the services that you offer right now?
Yeah, I would love to. So one-on-one, I work one-on-one with coaches. I do some what I call cohorts, which are smaller groups of coaches. Thus far, they've all been cohorts of in the same sport. So basketball, baseball, soccer, several baseball actually. So working with some cohorts, I've done some staff or some work with some staffs as well. So going in and working with the head coach and their coaching staff, the cohorts, those have been so good. I've really, really enjoyed those. And then over the last 3 months, actually over the last couple months, started what's called the tribe. The thing about a one-on-one and a cohort is there's a little bit of a higher bar with those as far as financially and just the commitment as far as time. In the cohorts, I'm asking people to carve out 8 to 10 to 16 weeks doing these cohorts, where the tribe is a little bit of a lower bar. It's every second and fourth Sunday night. It's $20 a month. And basically my goal is to have continual ongoing conversation about leadership. I think one of the things that we all need is those continual reminders, that just sharpening, that aspect of sharpening. So what we do on the tribe is we'll spend about 5 to 7 minutes, and I'll talk about a leadership topic that they have already read about. I'll post it. They'll read about it. I'll get on. I'll flesh some things out, and then we'll break up into small groups, and they'll discuss. I have some questions for them. They'll work through some different questions and basically kind of roundtable discuss a leadership topic. And then we'll come back together for the last 5 to 10 minutes and kind of finish it off. It's 1 hour every second and fourth Sunday. I really like it because I love the ongoing. It's not a huge time commitment. It's not a huge financial commitment, but what it does is hopefully a couple times a month just really sharpens people and keeps that conversation about leadership going. John Maxwell talks a ton about your leadership ability will determine the lid on in my case, the people I'm working with, it'll determine the lid of your program. So if your leadership is growing, if you're a really excellent leader, your program is going to rise. If not, you will put the lid on your program based on what your leadership capacity is. And you've seen this with the guest you've had on your podcast. I mean, Tim Corbin is a good baseball coach. Tim Corbin's a freak show of a leader. Like, that guy is a leader. If he were in business, he would be a CEO of a Fortune 100 company. If he were in the ministry, he would probably have a church of like 5,000 people. He is a leader. And so that allows his program to grow. So what my passion is to equip, is to encourage, to exhort, and just to start conversations about leadership. So a little bit rambling on the tribe because I'm really pumped up about it. I'll do one-on-one cohorts, and then the tribe are my general things that I'm doing right now.
No, I love the idea of the tribe, and it's very, not to talk about other people's money, because I'm the kind of person that I hate at the post office if they're upset that I won't pay 5 extra cents to ship it 2 days later, because it's my money. Don't tell me what to do with it. But $20 a month, if you're a college coach, to work on your self-improvement over time, to be a leader with other like-minded people, which I love too, right? You're weeding out people who aren't interested in that. You can find your tribe. Do you want to give an example of kind of maybe a topic you queue up one week so people can kind of hear what like I said at the beginning, leadership is this broad topic, but maybe you could nail down on some of the things you touch on.
Yeah, love it. So I in general, from a 30,000 foot view, I work through the grid of leading self, leading others, and leading a program. So for example, under the category of leading self, I'm going to talk about like one of the things we're going to talk about this week is 5 rhythms of growth. So we're going to talk about reading and reflecting and journaling. And so guys are consistently thinking through, and gals consistently thinking through, how do I continue to grow myself? What are the rhythms I need to create in my life that allow me to lead myself, allow me to be a really healthy coach? under the category of leading others. One of the things we've talked about here recently was feedback, how to create an environment of feedback in your program, which some people are going to do really naturally. I actually don't think it's a natural thing for leaders to create an atmosphere of continual feedback. A cousin of feedback is collaboration. So just bringing some of those things to light. And one of the topics under, just to give you an example, under leading a program is, hiring. Going to talk about, what are some things that you need to do when you're going to make a hire for those head coaches, and then obviously that would help assistants too. Okay, here's what they're looking for. Here's what you need to do. So those are some examples in each of the three categories that I major in: leading self, leading others, and leading a program.
If you enjoy this podcast, I also write a weekly newsletter sharing the best content I found in the last week that directly applies to coaches. Some of the best coaches in the world subscribe, and it's free. So go to coachingcoaches.substack.com or check out the link in the show notes to subscribe. Once again, that's coachingcoaches.substack.com. Let's get back to the episode.
Do you want to elaborate on the cohorts that you do a little bit too?
Yeah. So I've got several cohorts running, and I try to run several at a time. Most of them, like I said, are anywhere between 6 and 8 coaches of the same sport. Actually have ran one with athletic directors and hope to start another one of those. And again, it's very similar. I think some of it depends on assistant cohort or head coach cohort. For example, I've got a group of 8 assistant coaches right now going through a cohort that these guys are studs, man. They're hungry to learn. They're awesome. We have great discussions. We're going through about, I think it's 14 weeks with them, and we're kind of getting towards the tail end. It's been phenomenal. I have a cohort going on with some baseball head coaches right now. And I think what it does is, and you mentioned it, that like-mindedness to get on a call consistently and talk about content, to talk about culture, to talk about recruiting philosophies, to talk about, personal growth and self-awareness and recruiting and hiring, to talk about those topics with other like-minded people that can also sharpen you, can help, they're like-minded, but yet they have different ideas. They have different ways they go about things. It's been such a blessing. So yeah, that's a little bit kind of an insight into the cohorts that I'm running.
So you've got the tribe where it's $20 a month and you've got groups of coaches meeting together. What led you to kind of do a cohort and then have this like elite group of coaches do their own cohort? Because I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. So it was April of this past spring, and we're in pretty much shutdown mode. And I'm driving home from the store, and I'm listening to Shane Parrish, The Knowledge Project, which you and I have in common as far as we enjoy listening and reading his stuff. He's interviewing John Maxwell. John Maxwell is talking about, at one point during the podcast, I'm driving home from the store getting groceries, and he talks about the law of the inner circle, basically getting around people that sharpen you. They're either going to elevate you or they're going to, you're going to decrease depending on who you're around. So my thoughts then went from that to, I started thinking and asking these questions to myself. Can you help the 27-year-old coach who's a couple years into his career? Can you help that coach, female or male, regardless of sport? Can you help that coach get to another level? And I'm like, yeah, I think I can. I think I can. Okay. Can you help the 37-year-old coach, the 35 to 37-year-old coach who's a little bit further into his career? Can you help that person get to the next level? And by level, I mean, just take their leadership up a notch or two. And again, I think I can. And then the question I asked myself, the third question is, can you help that low to mid 40s who's maybe 6-7 years into their head coaching career? Can you help them? And again, I thought, yeah, I think I can. And then the fourth question, the last question I asked myself, this was my train of thought as I'm driving. Can you help the coach who's really, really stinking good right now become elite? And I just thought, man, I don't think so. I don't think so right now. And so I combined that train of thought, those questions that I asked myself, to the John Maxwell inner circle. And as I'm driving, I just think, man, I need to get a crew of really, really smart, great leaders and get around them so I can learn, so I can then help other people grow. So I reached out to two guys initially, Dan Hefner, head baseball coach at Dallas Baptist, good friend of mine, and Kevin Hambley, the volleyball coach at Stanford. I had gotten to know Kevin a little bit through my podcast. I asked them, I threw out the idea to them, and they were both like, dude, let's do it. We're in. So then we reached out, and some of their connections and some of my connections, and we just gathered a group of 6. One of the coaches had to drop out because of they were going to practice in the mornings right during the time we were going to do it because of all the COVID. And yeah, it was just kind of a mess. So we got Pat Murphy at Alabama, who is an unbelievable leader. Tim Corbin, we've talked about him. He's an unbelievable leader. Anson Dorrance, who, I don't know, is there a better leader? Is there a better coach in all of college athletics in all of history than Anson Dorrance? I don't know. You could probably argue. And then Kevin Hambley, Stanford volleyball freak show of a leader, Dan Haven. All these guys are phenomenal leaders. And what it has allowed me to do is it's allowed me to just get to see and peer into how they think, how they operate. It's been phenomenal. I think it has been a blessing for them because they're learning from each other. A lot of times those guys are the tip of the spear guys. They're the ones that are driving the ideas. They're the ones that are driving the conversation. They're the ones that everyone's looking to. And so when you get them in a group together, I just think, and by the way, they haven't said this, but I just sense like oh, great. I'm not the one driving everything now. I get to actually sit and hear Pat Murphy talk about how he builds culture, or Anson Dorrance communicate how he does his competitive cauldron, or Tim Corbin in his classrooms. I mean, I could go on and on what these guys bring. So I think it's been super valuable to me. I mean, it's been unbelievable valuable to me, but to those guys, I think they would all say it's been a really good experience. And I've learned a lot. I've really connected some dots on what makes great leaders great.
And I think I would imagine for them too, it's really nice to be able to talk about those things with coaches who are in other sports. And it's not the guy that you're going to talk to tonight, but you're going to go play him in the College World Series or, the Final Four next week. It's, Tim Corbin and Anson aren't going to play against each other, and they don't need to hold anything back and can be, I would assume, more vulnerable, honest, open about all of these things.
Totally. Yes. Yeah. I think the fact that they're not in the same sport, I actually think it's been really cool to see coaches who are coaching women and coaching men, and just the differences and honestly, a lot of similarities.
Yeah. I think that's interesting too. So a lot of the names you've mentioned, you've had on your podcast. The first time I came across you was when I was listening to your episode with Ant. So talk to me about the podcast. What made you start it? How's it been? What's been the biggest eye-opener from you? Because you've talked to a lot of really, really impressive people. Like you talked about leadership. A lot of good leaders on there.
Yeah. Man, I don't even remember exactly the moment where I thought I need to do this. I think it was kind of stirring around in my head for about 6 months, and then just remember deciding. I remember where I was. I was walking on the track and just thought, I'm starting it. I'm going for it. I'm going to do this. And so I just kind of dove in, and I think legitimately 2.5 weeks later, after thinking I'm going to do this, I recorded my first podcast with a good friend of mine, Dan Fitzgerald, assistant baseball coach at Dallas Baptist. And I was off and going. So yeah, that was the genesis of it. As the I think the heart behind it is I just want to learn. I want to learn from these coaches. And on one level, I could potentially reach out and say, hey, can you hop on a 30-minute phone call? I want to ask you a few questions. Or you could start a podcast and quote unquote legitimize the conversation I want to have with you. And it's been interesting. I really do it for myself. And I just happened to release the audio. So my questions, I think my questions that I ask can add value to the listeners. But really, when I'm prepping for an interview, I'm thinking, what am I curious about with this person? And hopefully the end result is my listeners are also curious, but man, it's honestly a radically selfish endeavor on my part. I just want to learn from really, really great leaders.
You've interviewed a lot of people on the podcast. So there are a few takeaways from those interviews that really, really stuck with you. I know no one has their favorite child, son or daughter, but maybe just some really exciting moments where you took a real big takeaway from someone.
Yeah. I'll probably, Colby, answer that question on maybe even a higher level, that the podcast and working with coaches and just kind of the mass quantity of coaches I've either interviewed and or worked with or been around that has just kind of helped me formulate this idea of what are those great leaders and great coaches? What are they doing? What attributes, what skills are they possessing? And I went on quite a journey, and I don't think it's ever going to be done, but I went quite a journey in like May and June of this past year, working on thinking through this grid of what are those skills and attributes that these elite leaders possess. And I started to see a couple things. One, I think they stack different things. So no leader looks the same. Jimmy Johnson's radically different than Bill Belichick. So to simply say, all great leaders are great communicators. And part of it is like, yes, they are, but it just looks different. Like and by the way, this happens a lot. Coaches look at a Bill Belichick and think that's how you do it. That's how you have success. Then you try to be somebody you're not. So I think I started to get some clarity on great leaders, elite leaders stack different skills and attributes. Some stack this really high and others stack these really high. And some have a pretty high level of 4 or 5 attributes that they stack. They're just very different. So that's the first thing that on this journey that I went down trying to figure out. And then I started thinking, okay, what are the big buckets? Because honestly, if you listen to podcasts long enough, there are literally hundreds of things thrown out and you would think that's the key. Like clarity's the key, communication's the key, organization's the key, having drives the key, being integrity's the key. And if you're not careful, it's just like all over the map. So I started thinking, okay, what are the big buckets? Can I put all of these things in big buckets? Because in my former profession of baseball, when we're looking at a pitcher, and you could do this with any sport, when I'm looking at a pitcher, I'm looking through, coaches nowadays are looking through a couple grids. The first grid is stuff. Like, how is his stuff? Fastball velocity, secondary pitches, how's his stuff? So that's one big category. Next category is going to be like athleticism. Next big category is probably going to be the mental side of the game. The next big category is probably going to be some intangibles. How do they fill the position? How do they hold their runners? So a coach is looking at a player thinking, okay, here are the 4 big buckets. Now, how do we raise the level? So when you say stuff, yes, he's got a good fastball. He needs a secondary pitch. Well, do you get him a slider, a curve, a changeup? Like what is that? And it's specific to him. So I thought I need a grid like this for leaders. So here is my best attempt. There are hundreds of books on leadership. Nobody ever is going to just have the market on, here's leadership and here's how you articulate it. So I don't want to come across as that. But these are the 4 big categories that as I just, again, studied and listened and interviewed leaders, these are what I came up with. Character. You talked about it when I interviewed you for my podcast over and over again. Billy Donovan, high character. Matt McCall, high character. Just so I have a hard time putting a low character person, I don't care how much they've won, in the elite coach category. So I start with character. Second thing is emotional intelligence. Can they read a room? Do they have a nuanced understanding of their strengths and weaknesses? Do they have a nuanced understanding of others? Can they build trust and safety in an organization? Are they present with others? Are they effective communicators? Those sort of like read the room type things that you have. So character, emotional intelligence. The third thing is clarity of vision, values, clarity of key behaviors that are necessary, clarity of process and procedures. I think elite leaders have real great clarity on taking complex things and making them really simple. One of the things, and I thought of you when I was interviewing, I thought of this on. I think the high level leaders can take in content and make sense of it and connect dots. And they read 3 books and they say, hey, this is what I learned from those. And you're like, holy cow, that was impressive. You changed how you do scouting reports based on those 3 books. I think they have a clarity of that's just kind of like just a high level of clarity when it comes to that. And then the last category is a psychology, a really strong psychology. They're courageous. They have great drive. They have focused determination. They're very resilient. They have a good motor. They bring good energy, kind of that psychology type toughness. So character, emotional intelligence, clarity, and psychology. It's kind of my best stab at it right now. And so then I now have a grid to look through of, okay, I'm working with Coach A. Where are we at? Do they need a changeup, a slider, or a curveball, so to speak? And how can we help grow them in this? 90% of this came from the cohorts and the podcast of just interviewing people and having the discussion of what makes this person or that person a great leader, just like I did with you, asking you about Billy Donovan and Richard Pitino and John Pelfrey. I'm gleaning information as you're sharing these stories and putting it into this, hopefully, data bank that makes sense. That was a long answer, dude.
No, I love it. And to me, it just goes back to what I've heard so many people talk about with Pete Carroll, about how he said competition was his word, and that's what he wanted to focus on, and that's who he was. And competition may not be the same for Steve Kerr, right? It's joy for him. And I think it's, like you talked about, it's these knobs where for each person, they're different, and you have to figure out where you are and then pull on one of those 4 things that you talked about, the pillars, and work on that area more.
I think you bring up a great point. So Pete Carroll is one, he's radically emotional. Both Pete Carroll and Steve Kerr, they're emotionally intelligent enough to know who they are. Then their clarity says, no, this is who I am. We are going to be about competition. And I promise you, if you talk to everybody in that building with the Seahawks, there's great clarity that they bring to their organization. So the idea is don't latch on to Pete Carroll's competitiveness or Steve Kerr's joy. Latch on to the fact that they know who they are and they bring great clarity to their organization, because without clarity and without a self-awareness and a comfort in your own skin, you can mimic all these people and it's not going to go well.
And I'm sure the players are just going to see right through that right away.
Totally.
Yep. So let's say you start sitting down with me and I'm doing one-on-one coaching with you. What are the sort of things you're looking for in me at the beginning, or how does that go for you to try to figure out, okay, which knob do we need to twist a little bit or build out a little bit better?
Yeah. So I'll do assessment. And the assessment is not some like deep scientific. It's probably having you fill out some stuff and then also just a lot of conversation. And so over time, as you share, hey, here's my pinch point, here's my challenges, this is where I'm struggling, then the grid I want to look through is, okay, is this a skill issue? Does Colby need to grow in some skills? Is this an internal, the skill, will, or hill? Is it a skill? Is it a will? Does he want to? Is there something impeding him? Is there like a hindrance to an attribute or like an internal thing? Or is he just, which laziness, the hill, the drive would go back to the internal. I'm trying to figure out, is it internal? Is it like something that we need to work through there? Or is it a skill? Do we need to grow in that area? So I'm just trying to figure out, what are your pinch points? What are your biggest challenges? And then, also, what are you doing really well? And then let's figure out how do we get to the core? What is the core root of what is your biggest challenge? Because if it's, I have a hard time holding people accountable, for example. Well, let's figure out what, like, the core root of that, why, and let's zero in on that. Is that because you haven't been clear? So intuitively, you just know you haven't been clear, so you don't really want to hold them accountable. Is it like a fear of man deal? Like, you honestly fear what they're like, do you want to be liked too much? Who knows? I mean, there's so much nuance to all this. So honestly, right away, we start doing a little assessment, and I just start peppering questions and spending time to get to know you. And hopefully, if you're working with me, you're going to be honest, you're going to be open. And we can start getting down to some key areas that, man, if you were to move the needle a little bit in these couple areas, that's a big needle move at the end of the day. And you take yourself from maybe a good leader to now all of a sudden you're in the category of like, dude, you're a really, really good leader. And let's just keep moving that needle.
I feel like if I was a coach, and I mean, hopefully you're not in this situation, but if you're a head coach and you feel like you can't trust your staff to give you real honest feedback, one, I think that would be really helpful. And two, if you're like an assistant and you want to grow, but maybe your head coach, you can't help that they're not giving you great feedback, I feel like that would be incredibly valuable to do. And on top of that too, it's just another person in your life who can assess blind spots that you may not see. Other people may not even see it around you, but in talking to you, you can kind of shine a light on those blind spots they're missing to help them grow in that area. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah. I talked to a coach this morning, and it can become really, really hard when you're emotionally attached and you're too close to the fire to have great perspective. One of the quotes I've heard is, it's hard to label a bottle when you're inside of it. So what I can provide is a third party that's legitimately, I am out for you. I am for your good. A third party who's honestly not super emotionally, attached. Like, I want all the coaches I work with to win, but I promise you, they're losing a lot of sleep when they lose. And I'm probably not losing the amount of sleep. I'm just not as emotionally invested, which some people would think, well, then you're not going to be as helpful. And it's like, actually, I think I'm more helpful when I'm not so close to the fire.
Yeah. Your success or failure is not based on a scoreboard of what the players are doing. It's based on that coach growing, which doesn't, team could go 0-50 and that doesn't affect what you're doing.
Totally. Yep.
So we've talked about all this. You have your articles, you've got your one-on-one tribe, staff coaching, cohorts, the podcast, interviewed Yankee great Aaron Boone. What's the end goal of all this? What do you hope to get out long-term of this? When you look back and say, that what I did with Kingdom Coaching, I hope I accomplished X.
Yeah. I really, really want to create, and I don't know if I have great language for it, Colby, but like the premier place where people come to get developed and equipped. And that might be in a cohort, that might be one-on-one, that might be in the tribe. But I want to invest in coaches and see coaches get developed and really flourish and thrive. I've shared this with people. I am not an out front guy. I don't have the shoulders or the desire to lead a big program. That's not me. I think I'm self-aware enough to know that's not me. But what is me is to pour into the person, the coach who is leading a large organization or leading a program. I don't want to be on the podium holding a trophy, but I really, really, really want to be behind the scenes who has poured into the coach who is on the podium holding the trophy. So I want to be like that premier place where people come to get equipped and developed as a leader. And sometimes that might be just get someone from really, really good to maybe that next level that can help them win a championship. Or maybe it's the 24-year-old coach who's just beginning. Anywhere in between that. That's my passion. It really gets me up every morning because I love to do it. And again, I am not that coach that's going to lead a program. I'm not that kind of leader. I am I pour into those sort of leaders.
Well, we talk about knowing yourself as a leader, and it sounds like you do. So I love it. So before we get to the end of episode questions, we've talked about a lot of different things today. Where can everyone go to learn more about all the above?
Yeah. So I'll start with Twitter, Kingdom Coach TW. You can message me on Twitter. My email is kingdomcoachingtw.com. So you can reach me on any of those and find out more about what I do on any of those, kingdomcoachingtw.com.
We will link everything in the show notes for you if you're listening, email, Twitter, website, and the podcast for sure, which I highly recommend to people. And while you're listening to this, go ahead and leave him a 5-star review and me a 5-star review, because we'll both appreciate it. So, Travis, some end of episode questions for you, and I'll do what I always do. I say they're the same for everyone, and they never are. So it's typically, what's one book every coach should read? But give me some leadership books for coaches, since we've talked so much about leadership today.
Yeah. You had Craig Custance on your podcast a while back, and after listening to the podcast, I went and got the book Behind the Bench. I thought it was phenomenal. That's the most recent one that comes to mind. I'm actually reading a book by Joe Ehrmann right now called Inside Out Coaching, which is phenomenal. He's a former NFL guy, just a really, really good book. I could go on and on and on. The most impactful book I've read over the last year or two is a book called Super Thinking. It's a mental model book that just was phenomenal. I loved it. I still reread it to this day. I'm constantly diving in. I'm like a mental model geek. I love reading about them. And so, yeah, those are a few that both I've read currently and also over the last couple of years that have been really impactful for me.
What's one person? So I'm going to change this one for you too. You've had a lot of phenomenal names on your podcast. Who's your whale? Who's the one person you would die to have on?
It's hard to, this was going to be somewhat cliche. It would be hard not to, if I had an opportunity to get Dabo Sweeney, to not get that guy. The energy he brings, I think he's a good dude. He seems just like a high character guy. Obviously he's one. It'd be hard not to pick that dude's brain for about an hour or two if I could.
As I said on your podcast, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So come on, Dabo.
Amen. Good dude. That's a great challenge. I love that. Yeah.
What's one area you're looking to improve in over the next year?
Well, I got about 5 of them that I need to improve on. I think the one area, this has been such a front and center thought over the last couple weeks with me, is to be more present with people. I won't bore you with the backstory, but visiting with a coach on my podcast mentioned it, and I just thought, golly, it just hit me a little bit different, that comment about being present with people.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the one area. I just want to be really, really present with people.
What's popular advice you hear people say you think is wrong?
I hear a lot, and this might be too nuanced, but I do think there's an important thing with this, and I say it a lot. Be yourself. You gotta be yourself. And on one level, completely agree. But on another level, I think it's really important not just to be yourself, but like be your really, really healthy self. I think it's hard, like when it's like, that's just the way I am, and it's like, well, that you're a jerk. That's a jerk. That I don't care if that is how you're wired. You're a jerk there. So yes, I totally get what they're saying, and I know the heart behind it. But I think just to maybe to parse it out a little bit, I think it's important to like not just be yourself, but like be your best freaking self. Like grow, get healthy, internally be healthy, emotional intelligence, all that. Like be your best self, because it's you can't treat people like crap and just say, well, I'm a high octane, high intensity guy. And it's like, well, no, that's cool. Well, I love that, but you're a jerk to everybody around you. So that would probably be the what I would answer that question with.
I actually love that answer. What advice do you have for young coaches who are listening to this?
you actually talked about it, Colby, and I think it's the thing that keeps coming up over and over and over again. I think the coaches that you look at that are really, really successful didn't come out of the womb successful, but they're learners. They read, they're growing, they're asking questions, they're reflecting. I heard Buzz Williams on a podcast talking about he journals, he's journaled or written every day for the last 15 years, and he's read a book a week for the last 10 years. We look at Tim Corbin, we look at Buzz Williams, we look at fill in the blank, whoever the it coach is, and we look at him and we're like, man, those guys, I think we almost kind of secretly want there to be like 2 or 3 just like magical things that they do that nobody else can do, or hopefully maybe I have some of their giftings. And in reality, they're gifted. There's no doubt they're gifted. But when you get to know like a Tim Corbin or a Kevin Hambley or a Pat Murphy or a Dan Hefner or an Anson Dorrance, you just see day after day, book after book, podcast after podcast, reflection after reflection stacked on. And you look up in 20 years and it's like, well, of course they're really, really sharp, excellent leaders. They have grown so much over the last 10, 15, 20 years. It's just very few people I have found will be consistent on that day in, day out. I'm going to get better today. I'm going to do something today that helps me grow. Most people won't stick with it. They'll read a book for 3 days and then they'll be knee deep in the latest Netflix, whatever. And by the way, I think it's okay to watch Netflix, but it's just a rare person that is just really driven and passionate about growing and getting better. And then in 15 years, you look up and it's like, you can kind of tell who has read a lot, who's intentionally had a growth type of mindset or a learning type of mindset. So I would just encourage, learn, read, reflect, grow, ask questions, do everything you can to get better today, and then do it again the next day.
Last question. What's the darkest moment you experienced professionally, and how did you overcome it?
I had one season that was really dark in particular at the University of Iowa as the pitching coach. We were not good. And I overcame it, I think, by probably some grit. Probably I had my best friend, Dan Fitzgerald, probably I vented a lot to him that he helped. And then honestly, at the end of the day, the season ended and I kind of got up, wiped myself off and kept going. So I don't even know if I have any sort of inspiration on how I got through it. It was just, you just kind of grind through it. The season ends and you just pick yourself up and I'm better for it. I'm better for going through that. I hate it. I would never want to go through it again. But a baseball season can be a really, 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 really long season when you can't pitch. And that was one of the years I had at Iowa. And so,
well, Travis, thank you for this. Appreciate it. Love the podcast. Love everything you do. Everyone go check it out. And look forward to listening to lots more episodes of you from afar.
Yeah, Colby, thanks. And back at you with your podcast. And I've mentioned this on my podcast. I want to say it here. Love your newsletter. Love your podcast. You are driving out and delivering some really, really great content. So same to you. Keep it up.
I appreciate it. It means a lot. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Coaching Coaches Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and receive our world-class newsletter in your inbox every Sunday. You can access both of those at coachingcoaches.co. Once again, that's coachingcoaches.co.